Welcome to Lesson 3 of your Coding for the Web workshop. In this lesson, we're going to be learning mostly about cascading style sheets, or CSS. So what is CSS and how does it work with HTML? We'll learn about the structure of CSS. We'll learn about different element tags, IDs, and classes that help to work with CSS and HTML together. Some new tags that are useful with cascading style sheets. And then your assignment will be to modify your existing web page with a style sheet to jazz it up and give it a little personality. So as I alluded to, CSS stands for Cascading Style Sheet. The HTML, CSS, and JavaScript are the three core languages of the World Wide Web. In general, the HTML document houses all of the content of the web page and the basic structure. CSS specifies the style and the way it looks and displays. It lets you change the look without modifying the content. One common use of CSS is to have one style for a desktop and one style for a mobile. So you'll have either two separate CSS files or one that has different tags in it for different displays. We'll get to JavaScript later, but JavaScript interacts with both of these languages to make your web page interactive. We're going to start by looking at an example CSS file to see how it interacts with HTML and makes a web page display differently in different contexts. So go to Visual Studio as you did before and make a new empty ASP.NET website. I've got a project right here. Okay? So in this project, we're going to add an empty HTML file. Go to your solution here. Mine says Example 1. Right-click and say Add, New Item, and this will be an HTML page. You can choose to give it a different name other than HTML page.html. That is up to you. It's common for your first HTML web page, like the one that's the main web page on a site, to be index.html. So if this is a main page, that's what I usually make. Okay? So now we've added it. Next, going to go back to the slide presentation. We're going to go to the class Google site and go to Lesson 3. Get the file index.html there, copy all of the contents, and paste all of that into the file we just made. So on the lesson website, you'll notice at the very top it says index.html. Click on that, and it opens up just as a plain text document. So I'm going to select all the text by clicking and dragging from the very top of the document all the way down to the bottom of it and doing Control-C. Go back over to Visual Studio, find your index.html file, get rid of what's already there, and then paste what you just copied with Control-V. Okay? So this is an HTML document taken from the website CSSZengarden.com. And CSSZengarden.com is kind of an open source repository for different CSS files, and it just is a demonstration website for what you can do with CSS. I recommend going there if you get a chance. The website for CSS Zengarden is csszengarden.com. We'll go there in a moment. For right now, I'm going to click Run and demo this web page in a web browser. So in this HTML document, it's pretty basic, okay? There are headers, there are paragraphs, there are links, there's some lists, and there's not much else, okay? So, but you can see the basic tags that we've learned about already: headings, paragraphs, links, and lists. So with CSS, you can really make this web page look different. Now notice we're not going to change the HTML document at all, but what we are going to do is add a cascading style sheet to it. So I'm going to close this web browser, and then I'm going to go back to the slide presentation so you can see the next step. We will go back to our Visual Studio project, and we're going to add another new item, and this time it's a style sheet. We'll clear the contents of the style sheet and paste the contents from our Google site into that one too. So I'll go back over to Visual Studio, go over to my solution, which says Example 1 right here, right click on it, Add, New Item, and then this next one will be a style sheet. Okay, notice that the title of it is stylesheet.css with capital S, capital S. There's not much in it right now. There's the word body and then open and closed. I call these punctuation marks curly braces. They kind of look like sideways mustaches, and you'll notice them on your keyboard kind of above the Enter key if you hit Shift, These are really important punctuation marks in many programming languages, and CSS is one of them. They're used to enclose instructions in CSS. So let's get rid of this code that's there, though. We're going to copy and paste content from our Google site. So go to the class Google site, find this document here that says style.css. We're going to open it, and we're going to copy everything. Control C, go back over to Visual Studio, and Control V to paste. We'll go ahead and preview it, and then we'll come back and look at the structure of it. So go ahead and click the preview button. Okay, and oops, I lost it. There we go. Oh, no, wait. There's another step we have to do before we just preview this. So we have the HTML document and we have the CSS document, but we haven't linked the two together. Close the preview window. Go back to Visual Studio, and notice that our HTML file is called index.html. Our CSS file is called stylesheet.css. In your index.html file, early on in this section that says head, if you look down a few lines, mine is on line 7, there's a tag that says link, rel equals style sheet, and then href equals, and it has a funny file name here. In href equals, you're going to get rid of what's in quotes, and you're going to type stylesheet.css just like it looks right here. Okay, it even gives you a little prompt so you know what to do. Stylesheet.css. Now, when you preview this web page, you're going to see something very different. This web page is completely changed, and the content of it hasn't changed at all. It's the same words, it's the same HTML tags. All they did was use CSS to format those tags so that they display a little differently, and it's beautiful. If you look at what they've done with the CSS here, none of this was done by changing the code in HTML. It was just adding style. So this really shows you some of the power that you can do with CSS. We're just going to get into some of the basics, but I encourage you to go to that website, csszerzengarden.com, and then you'll see, if you kind of expand it and look off to the side, some examples of different style sheets that take the same web page and then format it in different ways, and some of them are crazy cool. So you'll really enjoy looking at those. Okay, let's take a look at some of the structure of CSS now that we've seen what it can do. If I open stylesheet.css, let me move it over just a little. In stylesheet.css, you notice some things jump out at you right away. In green, these things that are demarked with /* and then / at the end, those are just comments. They're ignored by the code, but they're useful for including notes to yourself about what the code does. In HTML, you can also put in comments, and those comments are marked with a open bracket, exclamation mark, dash dash, and then dash dash, close bracket at the end. So those are ways that you can do comments in HTML. Again, it's open bracket, exclamation mark, dash dash, and then at the end of your comment, dash dash, close bracket, and anything in between those will be ignored. So next, you've got what looks like an HTML tag name, followed by a set of curly braces, and inside the set of curly braces, there's one or more attributes and values. So these are attributes that you can embed right in the HTML, but it's more common for people to put attributes in CSS so they're more flexible, and you can also apply them to many groups of elements and not just a single element. So what this says is that any tag that is demarked HTML and anything inside that tag is going to have these attributes, a margin of 0 and a padding value of 0. Anything in the body tag is going to have these attributes, this font, this line height, this color, this background, this margin, this padding, and so on down. So many of these things are tags. As you keep scrolling down, you'll also notice there's a tag and then there's kind of a sub-attribute of a tag. So an A, remember, is what we use for hyperlinks, and a hyperlink that's the link before you visit it is going to have these properties. A hyperlink that's already been visited is going to have these properties. You know how links kind of change color when you've already visited them? That's how you specify that in CSS. And then these properties are what you get when you hover over a link. when you focus on a link or when a link is the active page that you're on. So you can see tons of interesting things here. Let's look through the slide presentation so we can explore some of that structure of CSS and what you can do with it. So again, notice that the way to embed a style sheet that's a file is to use this link tag, and then href equals, and in quotes, you're going to put the name of your file. As long as it's in the same folder as your HTML file, you can embed a style sheet this way. Again, inside the structure, this is what the basic structure is. It's really important that it's attribute, and then a colon, value, and then a semicolon, and then on the next line, it's the next attribute. Groups of attributes are enclosed in curly braces. So you have an open curly brace, which is like the little mustache that goes like this, and then a closed curly brace, which is the mustache that goes like this, and groups of attributes are enclosed inside them. You may notice that colors have really interesting values. Like this says color, hashtag 555753. It's a strange value for a color. There's a reason it has those values, and we'll get to that. Okay, more CSS structure. You can use classes to group elements that have the same attributes and style. So let's say you want to have some headers have some properties and other headers have other properties. You can assign headers to belong to different classes. And then you can specify those classes in CSS to have certain attributes. So in this example here, this is the HTML and this is the CSS. In the HTML, there's a tag called div. Of course, somewhere at the bottom, there's an end tag div, tag/div, and then an attribute of that div is class equals page wrapper. Now you get to decide what the class name is. There's no fixed class names. Just make up something in the quotes that's made up of letters, numbers, and dashes. And then in the CSS, the way that you give properties to everything that has that same class tag is to put dot page wrapper, and then put a list of attributes and values. And any tag that you give the class name of page wrapper to is going to get those properties. So it's a useful way to group tags together and apply similar properties to groups to the same tags. Next, there's another attribute that you can add to CSS called ID. It works the exact same as class. So if you give the attribute ID, and then you give it a name in quotes, like I named this one power, and then in the CSS, you put hashtag power, and then curly braces, and then attributes inside the curly braces. So that'll give these attributes to any element that has the ID power. In general, IDs are usually used to uniquely identify one element. So let's say you just have one paragraph that you want to have these properties, but it's sort of exclusive, no other ones do. You generally use ID. If you have many tags that you want to give properties, you generally use class. But that's not a hard and fast rule, and you are allowed to break them. It's just a convention with people who code on the web. CSS colors, as I mentioned, have kind of cool properties. So let's talk about colors for a moment. Here's three examples of properties that describe colors. There's the color attribute, and if you use color as the attribute, that's going to change the text color. Background color, of course, changes the background color. And then there's border color, which changes the color of the border around something. You also have to specify a border width if this border is going to show up. So there's two ways to put color values in there. One is to give the color a name, and the other is to give the color a hex value. So for names, I'm going to go over to Visual Studio for a moment, and I'm going to pause while I open up my existing HTML file so that I can start generating some CSS and explore a little color with you. Pause for a moment while I go back to that project. Okay, we're back. So I've opened up the project that has an HTML and CSS file that I made. I'm going to preview this really quick so you can see what it looks like. So it's a really basic web page that's all about me. But you can see I've added some styling elements to it so far, mostly colors, right? So let's take a look a little bit at how I did those colors. This is one document. I don't have a separate style sheet. So the way I put the CSS in my document is in the head section, which you can see right here. Let me see if I can point to it. There's the head section. There's a tag down here that says style, and then underneath style I have all of my CSS code. Now in my CSS code I just have two categories of classes, color 1 and color 2. So they just describe different types of elements that I might want to have a different color scheme. Here's the end of the style section right here, and then the end of the head section, and then down here this is the body of my HTML. So the content is in the body. I gave the whole body the class of color 1, but then inside the body, nested within it, I'm going to have elements inside that have the class color 2. The innermost element, that class takes precedence over the outermost element. So for example, with this paragraph that I gave a class color 2, that's going to override the color 1 class, if that makes sense. So here's a paragraph and it has a class color 2. Here's an unordered list that's in class color 1. And then here's a paragraph that's class color 2, and a table that's class color 2. So in my CSS, I just have styles for anything labeled color 1 and anything labeled color 2. Now there's two ways to label colors, like I mentioned. One is with a hex code, and that's what this funny little hex code is right here. And the other is just the name. So I'm going to keep this hex code but comment it out. So I'm going to do that using /star, and then it already included the // so I'll just move it, //. So now that little hex code is saved, but it's commented out so it'll be ignored. And you can name any color you want. In fact, if I put color and then a colon, what's nice about Visual Studio is it has some prompts for me. And so I can pick a named color from here, like chartreuse, and as long as I put a semicolon at the end, anything with the class color 1 is going to have the text color of chartreuse. So when I hit run, think chartreuse is kind of a green. There it is, yes. So anything that's in that color 1 class will have a text color that's chartreuse. So named colors are one way that you can do colors. The other way is to do hex codes. So I'll teach you a little bit about that. Hex codes are a little more complicated. Hex values for colors look like this. There are 6 characters, and each of those characters can be 0 through 9, and then A through F. This is actually a number written in hexadecimal, which is base 16, instead of decimal, base 10. So imagine that if instead of 10 digits, 0 through 9, we worked with a number system that had 16 digits. And so you could represent all the numbers 0 through 15 by going 0 through 9, and then 10 is A, 11 is B, 12 is C, 13 is D, 14 is E, 15 is F. So if you write the letter F, you're actually writing a 15. If you have a 2-digit number, then the number that you're representing is this many ones, and then this many 16s. So since these last 2 digits are 6E, it's really representing 6 groups of 16 plus another 14. So I can't do that math in my head. Maybe you'd be able to, but that's what 6E represents. Hexadecimal is written this way because of the way that computers store information in binary code. 16 is an even power of 2, and so you can represent even powers of 2 very easily using hexadecimal. You don't necessarily need to know that, but you do need to know that because a color is represented by these 6 hexadecimal digits, every pair represents one of the primary colors in a computer. This is how much red is in a color. It's anywhere from 00 to FF. This is how much green is in a color, anywhere from 00 to FF. And this is how much blue is in a color, again, anywhere from 00 to FF. So this color value is going to have red all the way on, green all the way off, and blue will be somewhere in the middle. So this is going to be kind of a pinkish blue color. And you can mix up these numbers any way you want and generate any color of the rainbow. You can get hex values by searching for an online color picker, and so it lets you be really versatile, and you can pick any color that your eyes can perceive just by choosing the values of red, green, and blue. And I'll get to my favorite website for choosing colors in just a minute, but that's what those hex values are. So in my CSS file, when I get rid of chartreuse and instead I put in this crazy hex value, FFE74C, let me just move that back. So what that is, get rid of the comments there, that's all red, some green, and some blue. So when you actually display what this color looks like, I think it kind of comes out to be like a yellowish. Yeah, so that's all red, quite a lot of green, a tiny, tiny bit of blue. Okay. Next, there's CSS, there's a lot to it. We already mentioned you can embed CSS code right in your HTML file by using the style tag, and in between the begin style and end style, you'll just put all of your CSS code. You can also embed it using a tag that says link somewhere in the head section of your HTML document. To pick a color scheme, I wanted to show you a really cool tip that I found in a training class online. There's a website called Colors.co, Coolors.co. If you click on this link and go to Colors, it generates a palette of colors for you. So you just find the Colors website and go over to the right where it says Generate. Let me make sure you can see that okay. Yeah, so Generate. And it'll pick a palette, just a random palette for you. So you can click Generate as many times as you want until you find a palette that you like. Another cool thing that you can do is you can upload a picture and you can generate a color palette based on that picture. So you click on the photo button, and then I might go to my downloads folder and just pick a cute picture like this adorable computer with a stack of books. Copy it in there, and then if I use my cursor and drag over different parts of the picture, I can pick a color palette based on actual colors that I see in that picture. And then go to Next, open in the generator, and then I've got a color palette based on that picture. And the best thing about this website, of course, is that the hex code for these colors is right down here. So that's sort of fun. So in my web page that I made, I picked a color palette from Colors that I liked, and then I just used those colors in my hex code. So super fun. And that's how I came up with these different colors that you see in Visual Studio and those weird hex codes. And my colors are kind of weird, but they sort of go together in a weird way. So there you go. Next, navigation bars. This is one of the most powerful uses of CSS, and this is like the main reason why I think CSS is so incredibly useful. It's not just for applying cool color to your website, it also can apply, it can make your website look interactive even if you don't actually have any code there. So one key use of CSS is to take an unordered list and turn it into a navigation bar. I'd like to encourage you to go to the w3schools.com website when you get a chance. You'll just click on this link here, and it takes you to a tutorial on how to take an unordered list and turn it into a navigation bar. So these sample navigation bars you see on this website, that's actually an HTML code written just as a bullet list, but they use CSS to format it so it looks like an interactive menu. It's super cool, and it doesn't take much code at all to do this, just a tiny bit of CSS, and you can also make a cool navigation bar. So if I uncomment some of the code in my CSS here, this is this section here that's commented out, goodbye and goodbye. I've got my unordered list, which has some styles. I have a class called menu item, which has some attributes here. Menu item A means like this is a class, but inside that class, anything that has the A tag will get these attributes. And menu item again is a class, but anything in that class that has an A tag and you're hovering over it gets these attributes. And then when I run this, now this list that used to just say donuts, french fries, coffee, if I hover over the items, they light up, and they're links. So when I click on them, they take you to web pages where you can buy donuts, french fries, and coffee. And if you haven't figured it out, that's your assignment. So in your assignment, I want you to use your existing website, embed CSS right into it using the style tags in the head section. Use a color palette for your background colors, your text colors, your link colors, all that fun stuff. So give it a coherent color scheme. You can use fonts if you want, and if you want to use fonts, I recommend again you go to the w3schools.com webpage, and then I don't know if you can see this super well, but somewhere off to the right you should see CSS fonts, and you'll get lots of tips on how to include fonts in your webpage. Okay, so that's optional, just for fun if you'd like to. And then use a color palette and turn one unordered list into a navigation bar with active links. You're going to embed that code into your Google site and you're going to turn it in. If you're really struggling with this, like CSS is giving you some trouble, never fear. If you scroll down to the bottom of our lesson webpage, there is a cheat, and this has all of the code that I just demoed for you in my webpage, so you can use it as a guide. Don't copy it, of course. That wouldn't be any fun and you wouldn't learn anything, but you can use it for ideas. Hopefully this assignment makes sense, and I wish you the best of luck with it. Feel free to give me feedback, and thank you very much for your great attention.